So I went to this audition. You're not going to believe it, but at the end of the audition, I got offered the part of the leading role in the play. It's like 400 lines in the script, really complex comedic character, I should say.
Yeah.
That, but you had to do all sorts of buffoonery on stage and move dead bodies, kiss a couple of people, and all sorts of stuff. So I called I called my sister-in-law in England, who's an actress, and I told her about this, and I said, "Do you think I could flag my way through this and do it?" She said, "Yeah, you probably could. I could help you." But I called the director and said, "Are you crazy? Asking me. I've got no experience whatsoever. I've never done acting in my life." They said, "We know," because they had about 300 seats in the theatre of people paying every night to come in.
Yeah.
And
that's no joke.
Yeah, I thought, it's quite a pressure. They said, "Well, we'll sure you'll be fine, and we'll get you ready."
Alrighty, it is time to stop hitting snooze and awaken to a life worth being, the fun and inspiring podcast that dives deep into what makes life truly fulfilling. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, a self-proclaimed badass transformational life coach for women over 40. Join me as I explore the extraordinary journeys of ordinary people who've transformed their lives from the inside out. Tune in weekly to uncover the secrets to smashing through your perceived limits and creating a life that's not just well lived, but totally worth being. Welcome to another episode of A Life Worth Being. My guest today is Ray Martin, also known as the Daily Explorer. He's an entrepreneur, he's an entrepreneur and award-winning business leader. As a coach, mentor, facilitator, speaker, writer, and mindfulness teacher, he is a torchbearer for greater human consciousness. Ray is also a marathon runner and a fundraiser. He is on a mission to empower people to live authentically and to bring more joy and happiness into the world. Wow, I can't think of a better thing to do, Ray. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm super excited to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and what a lovely introduction. Thank you. That's embarrassing.
Well, you have a big story, and before we got hopped on, I think I told you that I'm a transitional life coach for women over 40, and I work specifically with helping people kind of, let go of those things that are no longer serving them and get out of their comfort zone and try new things. And you truly embody that. Now, I know that you decided to do, for various reasons, and I'll let you talk about them, decided to take a 6-month sabbatical, which ended up being 14-year journey. So
yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, that's about it. It's kind of like Gilligan's Island. Do you remember they went out on that 3-hour tour? And yeah. So tell us about your Gilligan's Island experience.
Yeah, of course. When I designed or made the intention to take a 6-month sabbatical, the main reason that was because I'd founded a business and become the CEO of the business as it grew, and my business partner, my co-founder, was my wife, the woman I was married to, and we were a husband and wife team, and it worked lovely, for a few years. So much so that we have this newspaper in England called the Daily Telegraph, and they actually chose me to be the recipient of the Business Leader of the Year award for being CEO of the company. So it was one of my proudest moments, what I call a peak moment in my coaching work with clients. And I felt sort of on top of the world for a kind of a short period, because shortly after that, my wife suddenly announced, quite unexpectedly, on return from a meeting away, that she had decided to leave me and the company.
Wow.
And it was a really huge, huge shock. I did not see it coming. And I think that's what shocked me the most, was that I didn't see it coming, apart from the actual departure of her, which was also a shock. Both were truly shocking. And at the same time, my father got very ill and he passed away. And so...
Oh my goodness, that's a lot to happen all at once.
Yeah, within a very short period of time, the life I was in had just imploded, and I felt like I was standing in a bomb crater, with 360-degree destruction all around me, just looking at the rubble going, "Oh my God, what's happened?" I thought I'd never be happy again, to be honest, Sue. I really did feel like desperately low.
That is,
And
yeah, that's so
yeah,
devastating. Yeah,
yeah,
like you said, I love the analogy of the bomb crater. You're just like,
yeah,
oh my God, I'm standing here in rubble and I don't know what to do. Yeah, how do I start putting the pieces back together?
yeah. I mean, in a way, it was, all these years later, I can see the gift that was in that event because the truth was, even though I had achieved a degree of material success that other people applauded, if I'm really honest with myself, I wasn't happy in that life. I didn't
Mm,
enjoy being the CEO, and there was much about that life that wasn't fulfilling to me. I felt like, in a weird way, I felt like I was living someone else's life. And during that dark period where I was trying to make sense of everything that had happened, I read a book by a lady called Bronnie Ware. You might have come across it. It's called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And she's a
okay, I think I've
hospice
heard
nurse.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a hospice nurse. And she says she asks every person who she works with in the last days or weeks of their life the same question: what do you most regret about your life? She said, I've
Yeah.
spoken to over 1,000 people, and they've all said this, that they regret the same 5 things. Never changes. Whether you're a janitor or a millionaire, it doesn't matter. And she said the number one thing of those 5 is, I wished I'd lived my life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. And
Yes.
when I read that, it just leapt off the page into my face because I was trying to make sense of the fact that my life had imploded and I wasn't in a life that was truly my own true path, if you like. So my life had collapsed, give me a weird opportunity in a way to actually find that true path because it had actually gone. I couldn't get it back. It was finished, that
Right.
life.
Yeah. We're done here. Now what?
Yeah, yeah. And so that really ignited a kind of pursuit or a quest, let's say, because Tony Robbins, who's a very well-known coach, in one of his
Hmm.
books, he says, your life is the questions you're asking, because the word question breaks into what quest am I on? The
Oh,
word question.
interesting. Yes.
What question that determines the questions you have at any moment in life. And so mine was, well, I love the fact that Bronnie Ware says, find the life that's true for you. I thought, what actually is that for me now? What does that actually look like? What's the daily look and feel of that life? I had no idea, of course. I really didn't know. And so my wisest friend said to me, go on a 6-month sabbatical, get some healing, make sense of all this, heal yourself emotionally, make sense of what has happened, and get some fresh perspective on life. So I knew I had to go somewhere where there weren't people like me who thought the same as me, because that would have been terrible. I wouldn't have got any new insight. So I decided to, and another friend said, why don't you go backpacking for a few months? And I thought I never had. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll go to Asia and do some backpacking. I've never been to Asia, never taken a break from work since I was 16 years old. I was 44 when this happened. And so I became probably the oldest backpacker on the circuit at that time and went to Asia for 6 months. And of course, that's when the magic started because some unforeseen events happened that I could never have planned. And I ended up staying a bit longer and a bit longer. And and then I got involved in some projects I dreamt up because of what I was discovering. I can
Yeah.
tell you more about those. And then I ended up living out my backpack for 14 years. Yeah.
Wow. That's a big backpack.
Yes. Yes, that's
I'm
right.
assuming you were traveling pretty light at
I
that
had a
point.
22 kilo luggage limit too. And I never went over it, maybe for 1 kilo here and there, but essentially that was how much I had to carry and a laptop.
Wow. So all of the things that, I mean, you totally let go of things. And I think that this
Yeah.
is something that was really interesting. I like what quest are you on? The question,
Yes.
the word question. I think that a lot of people are afraid. Well, like you said, when you're in that space and you're in that life and you're in whatever it is, you're just in it. You said yourself you weren't happy, but you didn't realize
Mm.
that it wasn't quite the right fit for you until there was nothing left, right? So,
Yeah.
what do
And
you think?
also, I'm sure this is true for others I've spoken to have confirmed it, which is I kind of thought, well, I had a kind of thinking, this is a bit strange, which was like, well, I shouldn't really complain because my life's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I felt a bit embarrassed about complaining about it because I had a really good salary, I had a lovely wife, decent home. but somehow it just didn't feel right. But I never felt it was right to kind of to moan about it or to complain. So I had this sort of guilt about feeling it wasn't right as well.
Well, I think that there's a difference between not feeling right and actually complaining about things. I mean, you can, but I think some people are even afraid to question, is this the right thing for me? What if I did something different? Or how do I, without going through the whole implosion thing? And I think that it really does sometimes take that implosion or explosion or whatever to bring people to that point where they have to ask that question because they have to rebuild, right? Where, so yeah. So tell me a little bit more about, what you packed up your bags. Did you sell all, you left behind everything really, right? You left the company, I'm assuming?
I didn't, there was a step in between all of those tragic events happening and me going off to backpack. Okay. There was a significant event which is worth talking about for a moment, which was for about a year I was paralyzed with grief and sadness, and I couldn't think my way out of it. I literally felt stuck beyond all stuckness. And then a friend of mine said, when you're really stuck and your outlook is so bleak you can't see a way forward, there's something you could do that might create a kind of crack in that stuckness, but it might not, but it could do, which is, why don't you just go and find someone else to go and look after or serve 100%, get your attention completely off yourself. Just go and find someone else you can help and you can be there for, and just forget about yourself for a while.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And it spoke to my voice of inner wisdom when I heard it. Not the voice in my head, but the voice deep in my inner gut. And I went, yeah, that's what I want to do. And so I found out, as these things seem to work, that one of my really good friends who I'd lost contact with because she'd moved to Australia with her husband, had breast cancer. And they'd just had a young son, a year before. And I contacted her and I said, this is what's going on for me. I'd love to come out and stay with you guys for a month and just look after you and take care of you and help you. She said, that'd be brilliant. That'd be amazing. Yeah, come. Yeah. So I flew to Australia. And because I was in Australia, I knew someone else who lived a couple of 100 miles away from Sydney, where my friends were. And so I said, look, I'm in Australia. It's a long way from England. So I said, of course, I'd love to visit you while I'm here. I might not get another chance. She said, yep, come stay. And when I got to her house, she said, me and my mum are going to the theatre. We're going to see a play. Do you want to come? I said, okay. And we went to see this play. And in the interval, I'm reading the play notes about the actors and stuff. And I saw this little ad in the programme saying that the next play to be on at that theatre was a British play called Out of Order about a member of Parliament. And they were inviting people to come forward to audition for it. And I turned to my friends and said, look, I'm English. I've got the perfect accent. I should be in that, just as a joke. And it wasn't an actor, of course. But and they said, well, funny you should say that, because we know the director of the play who's doing the casting. Yeah, we could tell him we know you and you could go to the audition here on Sunday. I said, yeah, come on, I'm only kidding. And I'm going back to England on Tuesday. I've got all this work to do and I can't I'll never get a part. And they said, well, just go for fun. Don't try and get a part in the play. Just do it for fun while you're here. So I said, yeah, that's a good idea. So I went to this audition. You're not going to believe it, but at the end of the audition, I got offered the part of the leading role in the play. It's like 400 lines in the script. Really complex comedic character, I should say.
Yeah.
But you had to do all sorts of buffoonery on stage and move dead bodies, kiss a couple of people, and all sorts of stuff. So I called I called my sister-in-law in England, who's an actress, and I told her about this. And I said, "Do you think I could flag my way through this and do it?" She said, "Yeah, you probably could. I could help you." But I called the director and said, "Are you crazy? Asking me. I've got no experience whatsoever. I've never done acting in my life." They said, "We know," because they had about 300 seats in the theatre of people paying every night to come in.
Yeah.
And
that's no joke.
Yeah, I thought, oh, it's quite a pressure. They said, well, we'll sure you'll be fine and we'll get you ready. You got 3 months to get ready. So I did a couple of things in order to clear the space to get permission to be there for myself. And I did it. I went back and I did it. I was in this play in Australia.
That's amazing.
And you know why I'm telling you this story and why I thought I didn't need to put it in is because you remember I said go out and help someone and some break or insight will come. Well, at the end of my month of helping my friend with cancer, nothing had changed, literally nothing. And I thought, oh, that didn't work. That was a crappy piece of advice. But the piece of advice never appreciated it. It never said in the advice how long it is before you get the new insight or the next thing. There's a time lag, and this never mentions this. So this was about 3 months after doing the play, and I'm getting ready to return to England. I'm sitting on the airplane flying back to England, noticing I feel this dread in my body, and I'm thinking, what's that about? Why do I feel so like, oh no, I'm going back to be Ray the businessman in London again.
Oh no!
And I thought, I just so don't want to do that. I've been this character, George Pigton, who I learned how to walk his walk, speak his voice, wear his clothes. I learned what he says, how he does things. I learned this character. Now I've got to be Ray the businessman character, and that was the first time I ever thought of my own life as being a character. I never had that thought before, and that was the insight that I got from going to Australia. Because as soon as I realised that Ray the businessman was a character that I'd written, and that I was playing the role of, I thought I can just kill that character off. I don't need to be him. Tony Robbins says, you're not just the actor in your life; you're the director and the script writer as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you can
change the script,
anything from those perspectives. And so that was why I decided to then sell my house in London and get rid of all my stuff and go back on the road. And that was
including your motorcycle. I saw
including my motorcycle that
you had in the gallery.
That was the thing I loved the most. Motorbike. Yeah, I really loved that bike.
There's more bikes. You can buy another one.
Indeed. Yeah. So that was the catalyst. It was going to Australia to look after my friend and doing the play, which gave me the insight about being a character. And then I realized, wow, I don't need to hold on or cling to this character. I can always write a new series in a year's time with that guy again.
Yeah, that is brilliant. I love that analogy. That is a major insight to.
Yeah, it really was. It really was, Sue. It was a breakthrough.
Kill that guy off and rewrite him.
And fair enough, I'd done that for 25 years and achieved medals and accolades, so I was pretty much done with that character anyway. I thought, who wants to be like David Schwimmer, who played Ross in Friends? I don't want to be Ross for the rest of my life,
Right? Yeah, we get typecast, right?
Yeah,
because people expect us to be a certain way, and you were Ray the businessman, and that's how people knew you, and now you're not.
And I think it's important to share that with your listeners because in my coaching work, I sometimes see that people have forgotten that they're playing different roles, that role of them at work is not them. It's not who they are. It's a role they put on and take off, when they go.
Yeah.
And it's not who they are. And I have to remind people about this.
So through your work and through your own personal insights, I'm sort of jumping ahead here a little bit, but I want to know, how do you, just what you told me, how do you help people understand that sort of character analogy and help them find their authentic character?
It's a really great question, and of course, it's not something you can do in a short period. It normally involves working with someone over a period of months. I would say, at least having meaningful conversations over that period. But there are 5 or 6 things that I think are really focal points. Like what I call them in the book. I wrote them as the 6 rules for happiness that I follow.
Okay.
And so that's how I've labeled them, but they're basically 6 things that work well for anyone, more or less, So the first one I always suggest people start with is doing a check on their core foundation, their core strength, their foundational strength. Like at the core, our life rests on what our vision is, what our values are, what our purpose is, what beliefs we hold that empower us or limit us. When we're actually doing something that puts us, what Ken Robinson used to call, in our element, which is you've got things you're really, really naturally talented and good at, and you've got passions, things in the world that you really care about. And when these two intersect, he says you're in your element because you're doing something you both love and you're really good at. And you could do that all day long and you never lose energy. You're always excited to do it. I know what you mean.
It doesn't seem like work or anything else.
Exactly.
It's like being
so you've
in
got
flow.
Vision, values, purpose, beliefs, element, and then you've got final one of those in the core strengths. It's what I would call driving forces, where you are usually in an unconscious way driven to behave in a certain way because of a force you're not conscious of, like the need for security, variety, the need for belonging, service, the need for certainty sometimes. These things chop and change with like the weather, but they're driving way we make decisions, and you need to be aware of those and what the part they're playing in influencing how you're thinking.
Yeah.
And so that's all of those makes up core strength or foundation. And so I'd spend quite a bit of time with people to make sure they've got clarity about each of those things, and at least enough clarity to take a step towards action that makes sense and feels right in their wisdom. So that would be one step. The other steps I ask people to consider are, where in their life are they losing power? And that comes through not taking 100% ownership. Because if you're taking 100% ownership for everything that happens to you, whether you like it or not, that's the most important caveat.
Yes.
Then you've got the power within you to take an alternate course or do something different to continue heading towards the vision that you have in your core vision. That if you are at the effect of something outside of yourself and you genuinely believe, I can't do that because X is stopping me or that person won't let me or whatever it is, then you've got no power to change that. So that's often a barrier for people who are waiting and hoping. They make some kind of excuses. It's usually just deluding themselves rather than lying to anyone else. But I think we lie to ourselves the most, much more than we do to other people.
Yeah.
So taking 100% ownership would be one of the 6, and then another one would be what I call becoming your own observer. Because when I discovered through going to meditation retreats in Buddhist monasteries while I was in that journey and doing meditation and learning about the mind and being able to step outside and observe me in the grips of my own mind, and I realized quite clearly that I am not the thoughts I'm having. I am whatever is observing me having those thoughts.
Yeah.
Because I can see I'm thinking those thoughts. I'm a third person view.
Yes. The seer.
And I call it, so this power to become your own observer is so useful, because when you're consumed by a thought, you can't move. You're kind of totally wrapped up with it and you're identified with it. But when you can see that you are consumed by a thought from the outside of yourself, you can actually choose to do something different. You can say, actually, I don't want to be consumed by that thought. What else could I be thinking that would be more useful? And you can choose to replace that. I'm describing this to you in a very simplistic way, and I'm sure if someone's listening,
and I'm right here with you. I totally get it. Yeah.
And they would go, "Yeah, but it's not that easy, Ray. Come on, And I agree. It's not. Yeah. It's easy to describe it, but it's very hard to practice it. Even for me, with all this understanding, I still struggle with some of these things, and I still find myself stuck. So I'm not saying I'm like a monk here. But that new understanding gave me a lot of options and choices and more mental freedom than I'd ever had. And I can carry on as more, but I think that the 6, the 6 are I really listed them.
And I think that being able to, step outside of yourself and outside of that situation and take that moment and say, oh, this is what's, it's almost like freeze frame, right? Where you can say, like in the movies, or where they stop and they're watching what's happening and like, oh, well, that's different. I understand now. And I think it's hard. I just want to
Yeah.
mention the title of your book. It's A Life Without, or Life Without a Tie, correct?
Yes. Yeah. This
Yeah.
is it here. Life Without a Tie.
For those of you who are
Yeah.
on the YouTube seeing it,
Yes.
yes, he's holding up his book,
Yeah.
Life Without a Tie. Yeah.
Life Without a Tie. Yeah.
So did
That
you?
came to me one morning when I was walking as I was writing. I was out in Thailand, and it just came into my thinking. I knew straight away that was the name of the book.
Is well, and you that came to you because you were in a place and in a space, personally, emotionally,
Yeah.
spiritually, where you allowed that thought to come to you.
Yes.
I mean, that was a simple way to explain it, but I
Yes.
mean, and it's true. It's when we work so hard to come to a conclusion or make it, what we try too hard, I think, as
Mm.
people. Whereas, I've had my biggest breakthroughs if I'm trying to figure something out when I'm not thinking about it, or usually it's in the shower. I'll be honest with you, because I'm not thinking about anything, right? I'm just in the shower. I'm like,
Brilliant.
oh, I could do this other thing, right? I could, I could do it this other way, do it differently. And
Yes.
then they just come to you when you're not trying to have things come to you.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a good
I'm assuming
place.
you weren't in the shower. You were on a hike. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's true.
but it's true. I mean, when we're not trying so hard
Yes.
and just letting ourselves be.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. I
so
think.
when you were writing the book, had you already started, like, did it come from journals that you were keeping when you were on the road and having these adventures, and then it culminated into a book?
Kind of as a bit of that.
Uh-huh.
When I left England, I had no intention whatsoever of ever writing a book. That was been the last thing
Yeah.
I would have ever thought of. But what was happening was in the first 2 or 3 or 4 years I was traveling, whenever I met people and they said, "Well, how long have you been traveling?" I said, "Oh, 2 or 3 years." 2 or 3 years? How come? What? Tell me, why is that possible? And I told them the story I've shared with you about the divorce and my dad, etc. And I told them about the play and various things. And often at the end of those evenings, those conversations, people said to me, "Do you know what, Ray? I found it fascinating hearing about your story. And if you ever write a book, would you email me and let me know? I'll give you my address because I'd really like to read it if you do." And I just laughed. I said, "You're kidding. I've got no intention of writing a book." And then when it got to about 20 people that said that, I still kind of laughed it off. But when it got to about 50, after 3 or 4 years, I thought, I started to realize, oh my gosh, the universe wants me to write a book about this. Keep getting the same message over and over.
Another insight. There you
Yeah,
go.
there it goes. And at the time that was occurring to me, and I was sort of sitting with it, should I, shan't I? Because I had a sense of how much work that would take.
Yes.
I saw a woman advertise a course on Facebook saying 5-day writers retreat in Chiang Mai, which is where I happened to be living at the time, saying she's coming from New York, a very well-known literary agent and author, to do this 5-day course. And so I wrote to her and said, "I can't believe this, the timeliness of this. You're coming to this place I live. Can I do the course?" And she said, "Yeah, you can." And so I then started the process of learning what it would actually take to write a book. But it wasn't until, that was in 2011, but it wasn't until about 2015 I actually started putting words on the page and writing it. Yeah, so it took me a while to kind of bring myself around to it.
I love that you were just open to all these things,
Yeah.
and aware and
Yes.
observant enough that you said, "Oh, okay. People want to hear what I have to say." And then,
Yeah.
"Oh, this person is teaching this course.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah." That's fantastic. And
And
I mean, you
yeah,
really have to trust, right?
you do, you
That is
really do, because you don't know what life is going to invite you to come and do. So, for example, between being a traveller and starting writing the book, I've been to a few places. Like I went to this elephant sanctuary in Thailand where they're rescuing elephants that are hurt.
I saw that. That's
I went to an
amazing.
orphanage in Nepal and organised a picnic for about 65 orphan kids, and it was brilliant. And I loved doing it. The kids loved it. I thought, God, I wish I could be doing more of this.
Yeah.
And so I sat, as I was traveling, I was sitting in the darkest, not in the dark, in the deepest parts of my mind, thinking, what can I do to help those people? I've got time, I've got skills, and what could I do? And as I was just contemplating that, I just happened to meet someone one evening who was a marathon runner. And I said, what do you do? And he told me he ran marathons. And I said, what's it like? And he described it. And as he was describing it, I could feel my body kind of tingling with a bit of excitement. He was about 10 years younger than me. I was 48 when I met that guy. He said, and I said to him,
Were you a runner previously at all?
No, exactly. I said, after about half an hour of listening to him, I said, and he knew was thinking about what to do for these places because we talked about that. I said, Matt, his name was Matt Campbell. Matt, do you think I could run a marathon? He looked at me and he said, well, you look quite fit. I mean, have you ever run before? I said, no. He said, I tell you what, I know why you want to do this. He said, I'll do a deal with you, Ray. If you stay here and live here for 6 months, I'll train you to run a marathon.
Wow.
And I said, okay, all right, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do it. And so I did. And so in the 1st of November 2009, I went and ran the New York Marathon to raise $15,000.
Oh, yeah, you didn't just run any marathon.
No, because Matt said to me, what marathon do you want to run? And I thought, now I had to be really honest to myself to answer that, because 2 years before I went to New York to meet a friend, and we were strolling around different parts of the city, but it happened to be the weekend that the New York Marathon was on, and we watched the runners coming in, and one of them was a British runner who I knew and was quite famous at the time. And we watched the end of the marathon. We both were cheering, and it was really exciting. And my friend turned to me at that point in 2007 and said, do you think you'd ever run a marathon? I said, no way, no way. And then I remember saying to her, I said, but if I did, I'd only want to run this one. That would be it. And then I forgot that. I literally forgot that. But I clearly remember saying it to her. So when Matt said to me, what marathon do you want to run? I remembered that moment. And I said, I doubt I'd ever get a place because I know about 1 million people a year apply. I said, but honestly, if I'm really honest, I'd like to run the New York Marathon. And he said, well, why don't you go in the ballot and see what you get? I said, okay. I put my name in the ballot. I got a place first time. It was like immediate. And I knew that's what I refer to. I've got a lot of these in the book, in my stories, but I called that's a confirmation signal that I'm doing the right thing, because I look for those confirmation signals in every decision. And if I get the signal that confirms it, I know it's right. And that was it.
Confirmation signal. Absolutely. Yes.
And so then I just went out to all the people that I know through my business life and everything and said, I'm running this New York Marathon. I'm raising the money for these things. Please support me doing this. And dollars were flying in from all over the place.
You're amazing. Never been an actor. And then you were in a play with the lead, and never run, period.
No.
Did the New York Marathon, raised a lot of money.
I don't want to delude anyone. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to run a marathon, and then the next minute you're running it. It does actually require 6 or 7 months of quite hard training, very hard training, which I did because I had the time.
I had a similar opportunity where a friend of mine said, hey, do you want to do a fundraising bike ride with me? And I'm like, well, I've never done that before. Sure, why not? Yeah. It was the California AIDS ride. And it was
man. Amazing.
7 days from San Francisco to LA. Yeah. And the most I had ever ridden my bike was like, 1.5 miles, maybe. Brilliant. Right. And you're camping, you're doing this stuff. So she was like, she had done bodybuilding and, she was a runner and a cyclist. And so I trained with her and we did the ride together. And I am really happy I trained with her, even though I was in tears most training days, because, we're in the Pacific Northwest and it's raining and it's cold. And it was just like, but it was life-changing for me. So, never say never, but you don't just get on a bike and ride for 7 days, however many miles that is, or get up and run a marathon. You got to do some conditioning and some training. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, but like you say, it was life changing. So I'm really glad that I did, and I ran 4 more after that, and I managed to raise more money. So,
have you done the Boston Marathon?
I was going to apply because it was one of the majors that everyone covets, but I discovered that you need to run you have what they call a qualifying time to enter that. And that means you have to demonstrate that you can run at a certain pace or speed. Like the qualifying time for men of my age was about 3 hours 30 minutes, and I barely run under 4 hours. So I thought I'll never be able to qualify to get in, so I didn't.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. I love that. That what was it? What did you call it? The opportune or the
A
significant
confirmation signal.
confirmation signal.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I
Okay.
tell you what, that's not. I borrowed that thinking from something else that I'd done in my life because I used to fly airplanes. And
Ah.
when you're in an airplane, you're obviously navigating using a lot of aids and instruments in the cockpit of the
Mm-hmm.
aircraft, and one of them is an instrument where if you want to fly, say, from New York to Boston, on the ground in New York, there's an instrument which has a needle, and you tune it to a frequency
Mm-hmm.
because there's a beacon on the ground at Boston Airport or in Boston. It's on the ground
Right.
and it emits a radio frequency signal. And if you know what that frequency is, you can tune it in your cockpit in New York, and the needle will start pointing towards it. So all
Mm-hmm.
you have to do is fly the needle until you reach that beacon. So that's how the instrument works. It's very clever. I mean, it's all been replaced by GPS now because it's more modern.
Right.
But that's when I've learned how to fly. That's how it worked. Now, the only
Are you private
danger
pilot?
I
Are you
was,
private
yeah,
pilot? Yeah,
the
me
only, the
too.
only, yeah, great. Okay, so the only danger with that system was
Mm-hmm.
that what happens if you tune the needle to Carolina or Charlotte or something by mistake, and you're flying down the needle and you're actually going to the wrong place. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever you tune to a beacon on the ground, you get a second or confirmation signal, which is an audio signal in your ear with a Morse code. It's a unique identifier for that beacon.
Right.
The Boston beacon can only have one audio confirmation. If it's not that one, it's the wrong one. So that's where I got that thinking from. It came from that.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And
Yeah,
yeah, I'd kind of forgotten about that as a
yeah,
pilot.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I told that story to someone once to kind of help them understand it, and they went, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." So I've used that ever since as a metaphor.
Well, it's true. Yeah, you're like, okay, yep, you're going in the right direction.
Yeah,
You made the right decision. Just
yeah,
stay on course
yeah. Exactly. Because there are,
and
the thing is,
compensate for the wind that's going to blow you one way or the other, too. That's the other.
yeah, and I found as well. I don't. You may have some experience of this that when you're practicing, say, a principle of non-attachment to things, I found I could be much more experimental in the outcomes I was hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, I'm going to go in that direction. If this happens, I'll be happy. If this happens, I'll be happy. And if this happens, I'll be happy. Whereas in my old life, it was, I've set this goal for the business. We have to achieve this much revenue or something like this. And if
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't happen, I'm going to be unhappy. Only that thing being achieved will let me be happy. Anything else doesn't count. And that was a very limiting way of living, I've discovered afterwards. But I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know it at the time because I made a lot of my happiness dependent on something external to me happening.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that until I'd had a different way of living for a while to see how limiting that had been. It never felt limiting when I was in it. I thought that was all there was. I really thought that was the only way of being happy, was to keep
Right.
achieving things, so.
And achieving those specific things. And
And
when
so, yeah,
when you set those goals and those whatever, and you like, I can't deviate, I can't, I
yeah,
have to achieve that specific goal. You really, what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Right.
yeah, yeah,
If you don't hit it, or if you fall
yes,
short, or if you whatever. And I'm more like you with like, okay, that would be a great thing to achieve. And if it takes me a while to get there, or I take a detour on the way, or never make it there, I've experienced other
yeah,
things along the way that I'm like, I'm okay with that.
yeah. Plus, I think this is probably some of the people out there listening will relate to, is that you're so focused on getting to that thing that you said you need to achieve that,
Yeah.
oh, I can't go to my son's sports day or my friend's birthday because that's just going to distract me from achieving this thing. So I don't have the bandwidth for that. No, I'm going to miss the rest of my life to have this
Because
one
I have
thing.
to achieve this one
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, which is going to make me happy for about 8 seconds, and that's it.
Yeah. And then you're like, okay, what's the next thing I
Yeah,
need to achieve?
correct. It's like it's weird, but I never saw it like that until I'd left it behind.
So what's next for Ray? Where's Ray now, and what's
Oh,
next for Ray?
well, funnily enough, I put a post on LinkedIn about a week ago. This is true, saying, life's full of irony sometimes. The man who published Life Without a Tie has now quite happily celebrating having 3 ties in his life again.
Oh,
I
do
just
tell.
recently bought a house in England for the first time in 20 years, so I've now got my own home again. But it's
Nice.
sort of, it's a home that I feel really fits with who I really am and matches the kind of way I want to live.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a loving, committed relationship with a partner that I've had for a
Nice.
year and a half, so that's very
Congratulations.
exciting for me to be evolving that and, developing that relationship, and it's got a joy
Mm-hmm.
all of its own. And then the third tie I laughingly said was that my niece got married like 2 weekends ago, and I actually wore a suit and tie to her wedding. And I hadn't worn a tie for over 20 years. It was the first time.
How did that feel?
Oh, it felt weird and lovely both together. Yeah, yeah. Because when I remember, my niece is 30, and I obviously have known her since the day she was born, and it was lovely to be there to celebrate
Wow.
her wedding. So life's different now, with those things happening.
Yeah.
I'm still going to travel and do things like that. In fact, I'm actually going back to Thailand for the winter, and I'll be there from November till January. But I've got this idea for another book brewing in my mind. I won't say too much about it, but different kind of book. But
Set the needle to the beacon and see what
yeah,
happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a few things and of course I coach people regularly,
Mm-hmm.
so I'll be doing that as long as I can keep adding value and finding people who want support like that. I'll be doing that. So
Well, I can imagine with all of the amazing wisdom and experience that you have that, people that work with you are going to have better lives. I mean, I can just feel that. And I just, all of the things that you've shared with me in our short conversation really make my heart smile.
great,
And the
great.
way that you live your life, and whether you have a couple of ties now or not, that's okay. I mean, a literal tie that you wore to the wedding, and a home and a partner, I think that's fantastic, because you know that you're still living your life the way you want to live it. And I think that that is amazing. So
Yeah.
I thank you so much for sharing your journey with me and with all of my listeners. If people want to get in touch with you, first of all, there's your book, right?
Yeah. And and like you said, the pictures, there's a website,
Yes.
lifewithoutatie.com, which has a lot more information about the book and photographs from different parts of the journey, which is why that website got built, because people kept asking for pictures.
Yeah.
So that's probably the best way, and you can message me via that. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I get a lot of messages through LinkedIn. So
Yeah, we'll also post we'll put all of your information in the show notes,
thank you.
and this will be up on LinkedIn, the link to the video version and the audio version and so forth, as well as all the other channels.
Oh, wow.
Ray, thank you so much for your time today, and I know that you're several hours ahead of me, so
It's okay.
I am going to let you relax for the rest of the evening and get to bed early for a change. How's that?
Oh, sounds great, Sue. Thank you so much. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, lovely to meet you too. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Life Worth Being. I hope you found it fun and inspiring. And to avoid a bad case of FOMO, please be sure to click that subscribe button. If you love what you heard today, please share it with a friend, and then hop on over to your favorite podcast platform and return the love with a wonderful review and 5-star rating. It would truly mean the world to me. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and on my website. Links below in the show notes. I appreciate you, and I will see you next week for more fresh insights on awakening a life worth being.